American mosaic, a gleaming thread of world history woven by the influence of cultures from around the globe. An amalgamation of ethnic talents that has produced what is now the richest, most powerful nation in the free world. And while diversity can be cited as a defining factor in the American experience, no group is more unique than the Black American. U.S. citizens who have contributed tremendously, but who at the same time have been reviled and revered, heralded and hunted. Coming up is a glimpse of the Black American legacy and its role in the creation of these United States, or what could aptly be described as a slice of Americana. The image of the men and women who shaped the West has usually been painted with white faces. They were the settlers who struggled against tremendous odds, the notorious outlaws, and the rugged, free-spirited cowboys. Over the years, the cowboy has emerged as America's macho hero. He is symbolic of the glorified era of the Old West, and his lifestyle has been romanticized in movies, television, and novels. The projected image of this national hero has usually been Anglo-Americans wearing wide-brim hats, getting up at the crack of dawn, herding cattle, roping calves, toting guns, as they say, and sleeping under the stars with their faithful horses. Little is known about the Afro-Americans who helped to settle the western frontier, the desperados and black cowboys who numbered in the thousands. If you're old enough, you may have seen this movie, Tomahawk. Van Heflin played Jim Bridger, and Jack Oakey played James Beckwourth. But in real life, Beckwourth, the famous frontiersman, was black. This is one of Hollywood's many racial errors about the Old West. James Beckwourth is one of the nation's most outstanding frontiersmen. This famous Indian fighter and trapper became a chief of the Crow Indians. Discovered the lowest point across the northern Sierra Nevada mountains, the Beckwourth Pass, as it came to be known, which led settlers during the gold rush. Beckwourth is also remembered as a co-founder of the city of Denver. It is a little-known fact that Beckwourth was a black man.
We've painted a white West. Cast of characters includes savage Indians and good white men and women, and blacks were entirely left out. And somehow it seemed that, like a lot of our history, American Revolution and so on, we just did not want to admit that blacks were there playing a crucial role and doing things that were patriotic and important at the time. And I think this is the reason why our TV shows, our movies, and so on, except as jokes, leave blacks out of the West.
Man, them two guys ride like they's going to dinner. And speaking of dinner, let's go over to the ranch house and see if we can promote some hot groceries. Bob, you ain't got no scruples against eating, has you?
Nope, not yet.
Make me know it then. Come on, let's go.
Okay, Dusty. Maybe we can get a job.
A job? What you trying to do? Spoil my appetite?
We now know that 1/3 to 1/4 of the cowboys were black men. They were all over the range, in every part of the West, and they were in the gunfights. Matter of fact, the first man shot in Dodge City was a black cowboy named Tex. First man arrested in Abilene was a black cowboy, and his black and white trail crew was so angry, they rode into Abilene and knocked down the stone jailhouse to get their buddy out. We know that blacks had a degree of freedom out west that they didn't have back east. In this picture, you can see 4 black cowboys standing near the bar having a drink. Black men couldn't do that in Charleston, South Carolina, or New York, or Boston at the same time. Many black settlers came out west after the Civil War. This is the Shores family that settled in Nebraska. They just somehow never made it into the school textbooks like they should have. Many thousands actually came out west. In Oklahoma, for example, there were 25 black communities started between 1890 and 1910. This is the town council of Boley, Oklahoma. They had a black sheriff, black deputy sheriff, and they managed their affairs very well. And they're still around out in Oklahoma. There were many blacks who got along very well with the Indians. This is Jim Taylor and one of his Ute friends. The Indians, remember, didn't have racial prejudice, so they accepted blacks into their tribes. There were also black con men out west, and you're looking at Ben Hodges, who, although he's armed to the teeth in this picture, he is really noted for having the fastest tongue in the West. He could talk anybody out of anything. This is Deadwood Dick, the only black cowboy to write a full autobiography telling of his life on the range. He knew Bat Masterson. He rode his horse into a saloon one time and ordered 2 drinks, one for him, one for the horse. He was captured by the Indians but got untied during the night and rode 100 miles on an unsaddled horse. He knew everybody and did everything. He arrived at Custer's last stand the night afterward and so on. Cherokee Bill was like Billy the Kid in everything but skin color. He killed 20 men before he was 21 and finally hanged before his 21st birthday. We also know that there were many blacks out in the regiments in the Civil War West, that 1/5 of the time when the bugles blew and the cavalry rode to the rescue, it was the famed 9th and 10th Black Cavalry Regiments. This picture was sketched by Frederick Remington, the noted Western artist who traveled with the regiments. They fought Comanches, Sioux, Apaches, chased after Billy the Kid, and tried to keep peace on the West. They were also our first machine gun experts. This picture shows the cavalrymen with their machine gun caissons. They developed techniques of machine gun fire that were later used in World War I. There were black scouts for the Army. This is a group called the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. And these men were so tough that in over a 10-year period, in 26 major engagements, they never lost a man in battle, never had one seriously wounded, and 4 of them earned the Congressional Medal of Honor.
To meet the demand of troops needed to keep peace in the West, 4 black units were dispatched to the new frontier: the 24th and 25th Infantry and the 9th and 10th Cavalry. It is ironic that the black soldier faced more hostility and violence from white settlers than the Indians. In fact, because of his bravery, the Native American reverently called him the Buffalo Soldier. The men of the 9th and 10th Cavalry composed 20% of the U.S. cavalry in the West. Buffalo soldiers were considered brave, disciplined, and extremely efficient in the care of their horses, arms, and equipment. And in spite of being faced with overt racism, coupled with the dubious task of protecting those who would rather see them dead, the Buffalo Soldier in 1876 still boasted the lowest desertion rate in the Frontier Army: 24 compared to 394 in the white 3rd and 5th Cavalry units. During the period of the Indian Wars, black soldiers won 14 Congressional Medals of Honor, 9 Certificates of Merit, and 29 Orders of Honorable Mention.
This is one of the greatest cowboys, perhaps the greatest of all time, Bill Pickett, aboard his horse Spradley. Pickett invented the cowboy sport of bulldogging and carried it all over the world. He had 2 assistants. People forget about this, but at one time or another, he was assisted by 2 men whom we've all heard of. One was called Tom Hicks, and the other was called Will Rogers.
Black women have also played a major role in shaping the West. When Aunt Clara Brown settled in Central City, Colorado in the 1860s, she opened a laundry, organized the first Sunday school, and nursed the sick. She was instrumental in bringing wagon loads of blacks to the western frontier following the Civil War. 6 feet tall and rugged was another heroine of the West, Mary Fields. She was well versed in the art of shooting. When in her 60s, she gained a reputation for delivering the mail under any adverse conditions, and later took a job driving a stagecoach. Biddy Mason, as a slave, had to walk from Mississippi to California to safeguard her master's cattle. A hard worker and clever investor, she gained her freedom and acquired huge amounts of land, which she donated for the building of schools, churches, and nursing homes. freedom fighters also prevailed in the West. One of them was a black millionairess named Mary Ellen Pleasant, also known as Mammy Pleasant. It was said that she helped fund John Brown's raid and was widely known in San Francisco for allegedly nefarious escapades. The census of 1790 reveals that about 18% of California's population had black ancestry. 26 of the 44 people who founded Los Angeles were said to have had African ancestry. The fear of armed blacks led to their exclusion from the militia during the colonial period. But wartime pressures forced the colonists to rescind that stance. Eventually, they even offered freedom to slaves as a reward for outstanding performance. Blacks were also not allowed to join the military at the outset of the Revolutionary War. However, the colonies soon adopted policies to include blacks when officials learned that the British had declared freedom for all blacks who joined them. Although many blacks fought for the spirit and principle of freedom espoused by our founding fathers, that freedom would not come to the black populace until another war took place, the Civil War. For almost 2 years, President Lincoln resisted the enlistment of black troops, claiming that the Civil War was a gentlemanly misunderstanding between white men. But wartime pressures would once, as in other wars, again demand the use of black troops in battle. Out of more than 186,000 blacks who served in the Union armies, more than 38,000 died, and they suffered a 40% higher casualty rate than white units. While the war to save the Union was raging, confrontations between whites and the Indians accelerated. The military, following the Civil War, afforded many freed blacks an opportunity to make a living and hopefully even earn a respectable position in society by defending their country. So the black soldier headed west. He was instrumental in making the new territory safe for American settlers, and because of his bravery, the Native American reverently called him the Buffalo Soldier. In spite of this, however, the white settlers resented and questioned the black soldier's presence. The next great military battle for black Americans was the Spanish-American War. They once again flocked to the recruitment officers to take part in the war effort. They were in the front line of battle and won numerous medals for bravery. Yet their display of patriotism and outstanding military service in the Cuban campaign did not improve their status in America. It is 1914. Europe and Russia are in the throes of war. Increased demand for wartime goods in the United States has created greater job opportunities for black Americans. Eventually, however, America joined the conflict. Blacks again rallied to the flag on a wave of patriotism. Again, the country resisted granting the descendants of African slaves the glory of battle. Their role during the war was primarily restricted to labor duty. Nevertheless, nearly a fourth of about 200,000 who went overseas saw combat, in spite of this restriction. The black 369th Infantry of the 93rd Division was one of the first to reach the German Rhine. The 369th Infantry Division had formerly been a Harlem National Guard outfit. Upon its arrival, the unit was relegated to service tasks for 2.5 months. The French, however, were in dire need of fighting men, so the regiment was formally transferred to the 4th French Army for combat. The unit fought in the trenches for more than half a year and never lost a foot of ground or had a prisoner captured. The men fought so fiercely that the Germans and French dubbed them the Hell Fighters. Before the war ended, the entire unit was given France's highest Medal of Honor. Blacks maintained a low presence in the military following World War I, but America would soon need recruits as the nation needed to mobilize its forces against Nazism. Because of pressure from the black community and the demand for increased military manpower, steps were taken to reduce discrimination in the armed forces. Blacks, for the first time, were admitted to the Air Force, flew as pilots, and served as commissioned officers in the Navy. The Marine Corps opened its doors, and the Army integrated its officer training schools. Segregation, however, still prevailed in the military and civilian life. About 1 million black servicemen and women served during the Second World War. Like their brothers, black women in the military have struggled to prove their worth. When the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps was formed in 1942, black women clamored to contribute their part in the war effort. In July 1942, 39 black women out of a pool of 440 women were on active duty. The word auxiliary was dropped from the name in September 1943, and by the summer of 1945, the Corps had 120 black officers and nearly 4,000 black enlisted women on duty. Black servicewomen would too feel the sting of bigotry. Participation in World War II did not better the condition of black Americans. A growing discontent among blacks and an unstable political climate prompted a change in the racial policy of the armed services. On July 28, 1948, President Harry Truman issued an executive order that would lead to the desegregation of the United States Armed Forces. The Korean battleground became the first true test of racially mixed units over a prolonged period. Integration, however, neither ended discrimination against black soldiers nor the charge that they were cowards. The 24th Infantry was the only black regiment in the Korean War. Desegregation of the armed services had dispersed most black units into larger white ones. While the North Koreans were moving southward, the regiment took Yecheon, the first town recaptured by American forces. But once again, familiar stories of ineptness began to surface. The unit was inactivated in October of 1951, under a cloud of bitter and controversial rumors. Most would forget, however, that 2 soldiers in the regiment, after their deaths, received the Congressional Medal of Honor for the first time since the Spanish-American War. Vietnam. The nation has entered its most controversial war. For the black soldier, it would mark a change in an age-old tradition.
In Vietnam, one of our concerns was that a disproportionate number of blacks were killed in combat units during the early days of Vietnam. And there is a reason for that. Young blacks, freed from any shackles as to where they could go or where they could serve in the United States Army, normally went to the elite units, the 82nd Airborne, the 101st, the 1st Cavalry Division. And as a result, those were the units that went to Vietnam first during the early days of the war. And those blacks were in combat infantry units, they were in artillery and army units, and they did suffer very high casualty rates.
Following World War I, Harlem became a beehive of artistic and literary creativity, known as the Harlem Renaissance. This picturesque Harlem of the 20s caught the world's imagination. Its colorful lifestyles, exotic flavor, and artistic genius gave birth to a rich tapestry of talent. The Harlem of story and song was a place of laughter, singing and dancing, and the playground for the rich and famous. The advent of the Great Depression, however, signaled the close of this famous period of black achievement. The face of Harlem had changed by the end of the 30s. The previously all-white ethnic community was becoming progressively black. It was during this period that its commercial and entertainment core moved from Lenox and 7th Avenues and 135th Street down to 125th Street, where several theaters catered to black audiences. But the Apollo Theater emerged as the premier showcase. Its legend begins in 1934. The Apollo was formerly an all-white music and burlesque theater called Hertig and Siemens. It reopened as the 125th Street Apollo Theater on January 26, 1934, after blacks moved in. The Apollo was the spawning ground for an incredible wealth of talent. Its list of alumni reads like a veritable who's who of black entertainers. Comedy routines were just one attraction at the Apollo's weekly revues. There were also dancers, singers, musicians, big bands and chorus girls. The theater put on as many as 31 shows a week. During the 30s and 40s, the Apollo provided a home for some of the best big bands in the country. Pioneering jazz greats proliferated during this period. Louis Armstrong, Lionel Hampton, and Count Basie were among the headliners. Another favorite was Duke Ellington. Famous orchestra leader Noble Sissle was a headliner at the Apollo in 1936. He is perhaps better known in theatrical circles as the man who put the words to Eubie Blake's music.
Hello, happiness in my heart abide. Hello, happiness, stay close by my side. Of all my friends, I love you best, 'cause when I've got you, I'll keep the rest. So hello, hello there, Mr. Happiness. Hello, brother, hey!
Sissle's vocalist during that period was Lena Horne, billed then as Leona Horne, but just as beautiful as ever.
Baby, I don't want no more loving. No, I'd rather be all alone. So when my payday comes around, I call my money on my own. Let me forget you, baby. Just as easy as that.
Another big band leader of the Apollo Club was Cab Calloway, the king of Hi-De-Ho. Famous jazz singer Billie Holiday's rise to stardom got its start at the Apollo also. Her big break came when Harlem showman Ralph Cooper discovered her singing in an uptown bar and grill.
Saddest tale on land or sea was when my man walked out on me.
I brought her on stage, and she sang When the Moon Turns Green and Them Their Eyes. The first time in my history, the first time in my history on stage, I ever saw an artist come on and sing two songs, be applauded back for an encore. She had to sing both numbers again. The audience wouldn't let her out. And of course, that was the beginning of Billie Holiday, you know. Louis Jordan, I first heard in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I brought him to the big city and put him in the band at the Apollo Theater. He made some recordings that were absolutely fantastic. And Louis Jordan and the Symphony 5 became a great attraction.
By the time blues singer Bessie Smith played the Apollo, she was already an established star. Her first hit record was in 1923, and in 1929, 5 years before the Apollo opened, she starred in the film St. Louis Blues. The list of early Apollo queens would not be complete without mentioning Ethel Waters, who won accolades for her dramatic performances in Hollywood and on Broadway. But Ethel Waters started her career as a singer.
Only Gabriel will redeem. And
Although the Apollo was a sanctuary for black artists, white performers were no strangers to this 125th Street stage. As the sound of jazz began changing, the interest in big bands began to fade. Bebop became the musical craze, and new stars such as Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Yardbird Parker took the limelight. Another legend who added glitter to the Apollo fame was the incomparable Nat King Cole. He became one of the very few blacks to have his own television show in the 50s.
I never lost my heart while stealing a glance, taking a chance, trying romance. But when your eyes hang out that danger sign, ooh, kick-a-rooney.
In my opinion, the amateur hour at the Apollo Theater was really the shot in the arm that the Apollo Theater needed. It made the Apollo Theater. It was a springboard for many, many artists. And you know, the unusual thing is that there was so much talent, and the talent was really so great. We had the opportunity to have many artists who today are top bracket artists, headline attractions, superstars.
Tony Brown Productions produces this program and is solely responsible for its content.